On the day the richest man in the city was buried, thunder shook the skies, not for his wealth, but for the secret he carried to the grave. His golden coffin sank, but above it, a storm of betrayal was waiting to rise. For when his will was read, his children were stripped of everything, and the Gateman, the man they despised, was crowned heir. My children, sit close, for in this tale you will learn how pride can blind, how greed can curse, and how truth, though buried, always finds its voice.
My children, gather close, for tonight's tale is not of kings in distant lands, but of men whose names filled city newspapers, whose secrets were whispered on street corners, and whose fall shook the very earth. For the wealth of a man may build towers of glass and stone, but when the truth comes knocking, even the strongest walls crumble like sand castles before the tide. On the day the richest man in the city was buried, the skies darkened as if the heavens themselves mourned. Clouds gathered heavy and black, and thunder rolled like the beating of ancestral drums. His golden coffin glistened under the dim light, carried by men who shook beneath its weight, not because it was heavy, but because of the secrets it carried. Around the grave stood governors in their agbadas, tycoons with dark glasses, socialites in flowing lace, and pastors with holy books. But none of them came for sorrow. No, their eyes carried greed, for they wondered who would inherit the empire he had built. The mansion he left behind towered at the edge of the city, walls of white marble, windows that reflected the sky, gardens where fountains danced. Within its halls, men of power once knelt for favors. In its dining room, foreign investors toasted glasses of wine. But now, though the billionaire's body was being lowered into the earth, another drama brewed above it. For as the old people say, when the elephant falls, even the frogs think themselves tall. When the wheel was opened, his 3 children, Daniel, Sarah, and Michael, arrived in black robes of sorrow. But their eyes glittered, not with tears, but with hunger. Daniel, the eldest, wore a designer suit beneath his mourning robe. Sarah, the only daughter, dripped in jewelry that sparkled even in the dim light. Michael, the youngest, walked in with the swagger of a man certain of tomorrow's riches. They rushed into the lawyer's chamber like vultures circling a carcass, whispering of yachts and penthouses and private jets they would soon claim. The lawyer, Mr. Roberts, an old man with gray hair and glasses that had seen more lies than truths, stood before them with trembling papers. Reporters lingered outside, their cameras flashing. Radio presenters whispered into microphones. Bloggers typed furiously on their phones, ready to blast headlines across the world. Even barber shops paused their clippers, waiting for the gist that would set the city on fire. The lawyer's voice rang out heavy with finality. All the companies, the estates, the billions, he paused, his eyes scanning the eager faces of the supposed heirs, shall not go to Daniel, nor Sarah, nor Michael. The room gasped. Chairs creaked. Daniel leaned forward, his jaw tightening. Sarah's mouth fell open, her painted lips trembling. Michael's brow furrowed, confusion washing over his arrogance. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and then dropped the stone that would shatter them all. Instead, it shall go to John, the Gateman. A silence heavier than stone fell upon the room. The air itself seemed to choke. Sarah gasped, her voice sharp as a blade. What madness is this? Michael slammed his palm against the mahogany table. Impossible! A common gateman? A man paid to open and close gate for us? Daniel roared, his voice trembling with rage. Their fury spilled like hot oil, but Mr. Roberts stood firm. The wheel had spoken, and the ink of the dead cannot be erased by the rage of the living. News spread across the city before the sun set. Tabloids screamed headlines, "Billionaire leaves fortune to Gateman." Radio jingles carried it between songs. Gossip spilled into traffic jams, markets, churches, mosques, and even classrooms. Some laughed, others shook their heads in disbelief. A gateman? What spell did he cast on the old man? People asked. Women selling pepper at the roadside whispered, money does not always follow blood. Perhaps it follows humility. Bloggers uploaded videos with captions like, "Get to glory, how a nobody became a billionaire overnight." But inside the mansion, bitterness fermented. For John, the gateman, the news was both a crown and a curse. He had stood at that gate for years, bowing to visitors, saluting cars that splashed him with puddled water, wearing the same faded uniform and shoes that had long lost their shine. He had endured insults, sneers, and the proud laughter of the rich children he now faced. He had swallowed his pain quietly because work was work and hunger does not listen to pride. Yet, though the world now called him master, John did not rejoice. He walked with the heaviness of a man carrying more than his share. For his mother, Anna, long dead, had often told him with weary eyes, "My son, you are not fatherless, you are simply hidden." He never understood those words, but they returned to him now like echoes in a cave. John had once been like many young men in the city, a graduate, diploma in hand, hope burning bright. He had walked the streets in search of work, submitting applications until his shoes tore. But rejection after rejection beat him down. Employers wanted connections, not competence. They asked for experience he could not have. One by one his dreams dimmed, until hunger drove him to accept the gateman's job. He told himself it was temporary, but months became years, and years became silence. And so when he was handed billions overnight, the crown felt heavier than chains. The lawyer, Mr. Roberts, looked at him with pity. Your master did not give you this wealth out of pity. He gave it to you for reasons that are deeper than the world knows. The billionaire's children, however, were not ready to accept defeat. Their grief turned to fury. They stormed the streets crying fraud. They accused the lawyer of forgery, filed lawsuits, and screamed at journalists. This is a scam. How can the son of a maid, a nobody, inherit what belongs to us? Sarah wailed on live television, her mascara running like ink in the rain. Michael rallied their friends, boasting they would overturn the will. But behind their anger hid another truth. They feared public shame. For in the city, honor is wealth, and to be stripped of both is to be naked in the marketplace. And so they whispered among themselves, if the law cannot undo this madness, then let us find other ways. John soon began to feel their hatred like cold wind on his skin. Twice, strange men followed him at night, their footsteps too deliberate, their silence too heavy. Once, as he walked home, a car screeched from the shadows, its headlights blinding, aiming straight at him. He leapt into a gutter, bruised but alive. Another time, a meal was served to him in the kitchen. The first spoonful burned his tongue with bitterness, a taste darker than ash. He spat it out, his instincts saving him from poison. Still, John did not rage. He remembered his mother's words whispering like wind in the trees. You are not fatherless, you are simply hidden. Each night, he knelt by his small bed and prayed to the God of the innocent. And in his dreams, his mother came to him, standing by a river, her face calm, her voice clear. Do not fight fire with fire. Your strength is impatience. Your crown will not be taken by blood, but by humility. Meanwhile, the city feasted on gossip. On radio shows, callers argued fiercely. One voice shouted, "The will is a fraud." Another countered, "But is bloodline the only measure of worth? What if humility is the true inheritance?" At bus stops, conductors slapped the sides of their buses yelling, "Enter quickly, people. The gateman is now richer than your landlords." Markets echoed with laughter as women joked, "If being a gateman makes one a billionaire, let my son quit school today." Even churches and mosques joined the debate. Preachers thundered from pulpits, "Humility will lift you higher than arrogance." Imams quoted verses on destiny, warning against envy. The city was divided, but the gist never left anyone's lips. And through it all, John walked quietly, his heart trembling with both fear and wonder, for he knew the story was not finished. The lawyer, Mr. Roberts, saw the storm brewing in John's eyes, a storm of confusion, fear, and disbelief. He called John quietly one evening,
away from the flashing cameras, away from the reporters who camped at the mansion gates like vultures waiting for scraps. In his office, the air smelt of old paper and secrets. He locked the door, pulled out a brown envelope sealed with wax, and placed it gently on the table. "John," he began, his voice low, his eyes glinting with a mixture of pity and duty. "The world thinks this fortune fell on you by accident, but nothing about it was accidental. Your master, Mr. Williams, did not give you this empire out of pity. He gave it to you because you are his blood." John froze. His heart pounded like a drum in a masquerade. "His blood?" he whispered. Robert nodded slowly. "Your mother, Anna, she once served in this house as a maid. She bore you after Mr. Williams broke his trust. She fled in shame, raising you alone. He searched for her for years. When he finally found you, she was gone. Only you remained. That is why he placed you at the gate, to test you, to see if humility ran in your veins." The room tilted in John's eyes. His knees buckled, and he gripped the edge of the table. Memories of his mother flooded back, her weary eyes, her silence whenever he asked about his father, the way she prayed at night, whispering words he could not hear. Tears blurred his vision as he understood her final words. "You are not fatherless.
You are simply hidden." Robert slid the envelope toward him. Inside were documents, photographs, and test results. At the very top lay the DNA report, stamped and signed. John's trembling hands lifted it, and the truth stared back at him. He was the biological son of the billionaire. But that was not the only secret hidden in those papers. For beneath them lay another report, another set of DNA results. This time, the names printed were Daniel, Sarah, and Michael. And beside each of their names, in cold, clinical print, the words were clear: not the biological children of Mr. Williams. John's mouth went dry. His voice cracked as he asked, "If they are not his children, then whose are they?" Robert sighed, his shoulders sagging under the weight of truths too heavy for any man to carry. "They are the children of his younger brother." The revelation cut deeper than any sword. John staggered backward, his mind spinning. Roberts continued, his voice trembling. Mr. Williams' younger brother envied him. He wanted his wealth, his power, his life. In secret, he betrayed him by sowing his seed in the very woman Mr. Williams trusted. One by one, the children he raised as his own turned out not to be his blood, but his brother's. Imagine his torment, John. Imagine his shame. A man who thought himself a father discovered he was nothing but a caretaker of another man's seed. John's breath came in ragged gasps. The ground beneath him felt unstable. Robert's words pressed on. And as fate would have it, that very brother, the true father of Daniel, Sarah, and Michael, died only months ago. A car accident on a lonely highway. Flames consumed his body before help arrived. Many whispered it was an accident. Others swore it was the hand of judgment. But dead men answer no questions. Silence filled the room. Outside, the distant sound of traffic and city horns hummed like a reminder that life continued even when one man's world shattered. John's tears fell freely now. He thought of the years he had been mocked, spat upon, treated like a nobody at the mansion gate. He thought of how Sarah once told him, "You are beneath us. Even our dogs live better than you." He thought of Daniel's laughter when he stumbled in the rain, drenched to the skin. He thought of Michael's cruel habit of throwing his car keys at him and commanding, "Polish my shoes too, Gateman." And yet, through all of it, the truth was this: he was the heir. And they, the ones who mocked him, were the impostors. But secrets are like fire. Once they burn,
They spread, consuming everything in their path. The billionaire's children soon heard whispers of the DNA results. Gossip slipped from tongues, in bars, in salons, in the mouths of drivers who once worked for the family. "They are not even his blood," some shouted. "Their true father died like a thief in the night." Others shook their heads in disbelief. So all their boasting was built on a lie. The tabloids caught the scent like wolves. Headlines screamed, "William's children, not true heirs." Talk shows dissected every rumor. Radio presenters laughed into microphones. Imagine, after all their noise, they are heirs of betrayal, not of blood. The scandal painted Daniel, Sarah, and Michael not just as disinherited, but as frauds in the eyes of the world. Their rage deepened. Daniel stormed into the lawyer's office, his fists clenched. "You old liar! You forged those tests!" he bellowed, his spit spraying across the desk. Sarah wept in front of cameras, screaming, "This is character assassination! They want to erase us!" Michael, red-eyed and shaking, slammed doors, shouting, "We will not be humiliated like this! We will fight until blood flows!" And they fought they did. They bribed judges, offering suitcases of cash to twist the law. They hired journalists to write glowing stories in their favor. And they even sought out dark corners of the city where men with knives and cold eyes sold their loyalty for a price. Twice, John barely escaped their traps. Once, his car brakes failed on a highway bend, saved only by divine mercy when the vehicle skidded to a halt inches from the cliff. Another time, a masked man broke into his room, blade in hand, but stumbled on his way in, crashing into the door frame and fleeing before he could strike. Yet, in every danger, John felt a strange protection, as though his mother's spirit still hovered near, shielding him from harm. In his dreams, she returned, her voice calm as ever. "Do not fear, my son. The fire of envy burns hot, but it consumes only those who feed it. Walk in patience, and your enemies will fall on their own swords." The city grew wilder with gossip. Some mocked the false heirs cruelly. Others pitied them, saying, "They are not guilty of being born. The sins were their fathers, not theirs." Markets hummed with arguments. At barber shops, men slapped their thighs in laughter. "Ah, the Gateman is the true son, and the rich children are bastards. This world is a market. You see many things before you leave." But beneath the laughter, there was danger. For humiliation can drive a wounded heart into madness. And Daniel, Sarah, and Michael, now stripped of their pride, sharpened their hatred into a blade. The city grew restless as the scandal deepened. Once, the Williams mansion had been a fortress of pride and power. Now, it was a stage for mockery. Cameras flashed at every gate movement. News anchors reported every rumor with gleeful voices. For the first time in their lives, Daniel, Sarah, and Michael walked the streets with lowered heads. Their phones buzzed with endless messages, not of respect, but of ridicule. But humiliation alone could not quench their thirst for revenge. Daniel, hot-tempered and reckless, sought darker means. In a hidden tavern at the edge of the city, he met with men who did not ask questions. "Remove him," he growled, his voice low. "I will pay whatever you want. That Gateman must not sit on what belongs to us." Sarah, broken by shame, tried to twist public sympathy. She cried in front of cameras, her tears falling like rain. "He was only a gateman, and now he wants to erase us. Is this justice? Is this what our father would have wanted?" She fed her words to tabloids hungry for drama, painting herself and her brothers as victims of a cruel lie. Michael, quiet but cunning, attempted bribery at the highest level. He sought politicians, offering them wealth from accounts still hidden in foreign banks, changed the records, destroy the will, make the world forget this nonsense. But one by one, their plans collapsed. The assassins Daniel hired vanished into the night, leaving no trace, perhaps realizing their target was shielded by something greater than man. The journalist Sarah Pate grew tired of her tears, finding juicier headlines elsewhere. And the politicians Michael tried to bribe laughed behind his back, saying, "You cannot bribe fate, my friend. Even kings bow before truth." Meanwhile, John, the once forgotten Gateman, bore his new life with trembling hands. The riches were his, yes, but they felt heavy, as though they carried the weight of generations of deceit. Every day he rose early, walking through the grand halls, touching the polished banisters, staring at the chandeliers that once sparkled above his bowed head. Servants now greeted him with respect, their eyes soft, their voices low. But John never forgot the days he was invisible, when his meals were leftovers, when his voice carried no weight. And so, when the lawyer Roberts asked him one evening, "What shall we do with them? Shall we prosecute them for attempted murder, for fraud, for conspiracy?" John shook his head slowly. "No," he said softly. "Their punishment is already greater than prison. They have been stripped of the one thing they worshipped most, their pride." Roberts frowned. "But John, they will come again. Their bitterness will not fade." John's eyes glistened with tears, but his voice was steady. "I know, but if I fight them, I become them. My mother taught me that mercy is not weakness. It is strength that refuses to mirror the cruelty of others." In the weeks that followed, John did something that shocked the entire nation. He called a press conference, standing before the same cameras that had mocked him. He stood tall, his suit simple, his face calm. The lights flashed as he began to speak.
"I did not ask for this," he said, his voice carrying across television screens and radio waves. "I was born into silence, raised without a father's name. I walked at this gate not knowing the truth of my blood. But when truth came, it came like fire, burning away lies, but also lighting a path forward. My father's will gave me wealth, but what I value more is wisdom. And wisdom tells me this: wealth without love is emptiness. Power without humility is ruin. I forgive those who despised me. I forgive those who plotted against me, for they are prisoners of their envy, while I am free." Gasps filled the room. Reporters who came expecting rage or vengeance instead had mercy. In homes across the city, mothers nodded in approval. Elders stroked their beds and muttered, "This boy carries the spirit of his mother." Even children who barely understood the scandal repeated his words: "Wealth without love is emptiness." Daniel, Sarah, and Michael, watching from a distance, felt the sting of his forgiveness, sharper than any whip. For how do you fight a man who refuses to fight you back? How do you defeat someone who meets your hatred with mercy? Their anger cuddled into silence, their names fading from headlines, their shadows swallowed by the very darkness they once embraced. John, on the other hand, grew into his role with quiet grace. He rebuilt the mansion not as a fortress of pride, but as a house of generosity. Scholarships were created in his father's name, though the world knew the truth of whose son he truly was. Jobs were given to the poor. Widows received food, and orphans found shelter within the walls once filled with arrogance. Where the children of envy had failed, the son of humility succeeded. And so the story reached its end, not with the roar of revenge, but with the whisper of forgiveness. For life, dear listener, is a market. You may strut with pride today, but tomorrow you may be forced to beg at the stall of humility.
The children of the rich mocked the son of a maid, yet in the end, it was he who carried the true inheritance, not of money alone, but of dignity, wisdom, and mercy. Let this story remind you, do not despise the lowly, for the stone you reject today may become the cornerstone tomorrow. Do not boast in riches, for wealth fades, but truth stands. And above all, know this: mercy is greater than vengeance, and forgiveness is the crown that no thief can steal. And as the griots of old would say, a man's worth is not measured by the gold in his chest, but by the peace in his heart. If this story touched your heart, then remember, every tale carries a lesson, and every lesson carries light. Stay with Tales by Sammie, where stories breathe wisdom, where the voices of our ancestors guide us, and where every word reminds us that life is not just to be lived, but to be understood. Subscribe, listen, and share these tales, for somewhere, someone you love needs the wisdom hidden in his story.